Nightmare at 20,000 Feet aired on October 11th, 1963. It was based on one of the many classic stories by Richard Matheson, who also wrote the screenplay. I've linked to a collection of his short stories in the description below. This episode was directed by Richard Donner, who would go on to direct movies like Superman, Lethal Weapon, and The Omen. It's no wonder both the action and suspense are so well done in this episode. We're introduced to Robert Wilson, played by William Shatner, before he'd go on to command the Starfleet on Star Trek, become Michael Myers' skin mask, and give us the ever-beloved Christmas classic, Shatner Claus. We're knee-deep in the Shat. In this episode, he's playing a salesman who is recovering from a nervous breakdown that occurred on a previous flight 6 months ago. Now, he's flying home with his wife, though he's very nervous about being on a plane again. As they get seated, his wifey-poo decides to catch some shut-eye, leaving her nervous wreck of a husband awake all by himself. That's when he notices something outside his window, a gremlin that my lovely grandfather would describe as meaner than a snake, is on the wing of the plane, shrouded by the stormy darkness. Every time Wilson tries to show someone else, the gremlin vanishes into the night air. To make matters worse, people have a hard time believing something could possibly be on the wing of a plane that's 40,000 feet in the air, traveling at 600 miles per hour.
There's a man out there.
What?
Even our main protagonist begins to question his own sanity, repeating over and over to himself that nothing is there, all while the creature stares at him directly through his window. Tensions rise as things begin to escalate with the gremlin, who is now deconstructing the plane, trying to disable the engine. Wilson makes one last plea, trying to warn everyone before the plane goes down in a fiery blaze. While his wife tries to support her husband as best she can, she fears for his mental state. Believing he may be having another mental breakdown, Wilson is given a pill to help him get some rest, which he hides in his mouth and then spits out. He has faith in what he's seeing. He comes to the conclusion that he must stop this threat at any cost, which he does by stealing an armed officer's gun, opening the emergency window, and firing at the gremlin, effectively killing the monster while almost being sucked out of the window himself. By the end of the episode, we see Wilson being escorted off of the plane on a stretcher, still proclaiming his sanity, while everyone else thinks this man has had another nervous breakdown. The camera pans over, and we see a panel of the plane has been torn up, revealing that Robert Wilson was, in fact, a sane man, placed in an extraordinary circumstance. What can we learn from this classic story? The episode and the gremlin itself could serve as a metaphor for mental health. Wilson had a breakdown and underwent 6 months of therapy to recover on his own, while his wife stayed at home taking care of the children. As Wilson is ready to return home, he must come to terms with his own fears by getting on a plane. His wife and others try to be there for him within reason, but the gremlin, much like one's own mental health, is something that only he can see, and something that he must ultimately face all on his own. While people suffer through a mental health crisis, it doesn't mean they're forever an unreliable narrator, especially if they've done the recovery work. Now, Robert Wilson and everyone else around him is in a better place because of his efforts. We don't have to be experiencing something for ourselves to be understanding and compassionate of what others claim to be experiencing. This doesn't mean that you have to believe everything you hear, especially if someone is telling you there's a monster outside of their window. But remember that the monster is real for them. What's your take on this episode? Do you think I nailed it? Or was there something I missed? Let me know in the comments. Hey, while you're down there, you should also hit that like button. Continue your trip into the Twilight Zone with these videos.